your status?
Alive.
Excellent. So you're both okay.
Positioning that. There it is. UAV spotted. We fight. Trigger's down.
Howdy, I'm Kodiak Bricks, and I make stuff. If you're anything like me, you were intimidated when you eventually ventured into the instructions tab of Studio. Luckily, the part of my brain that processes fear and social ridicule is irreparably damaged, so I'm here to hopefully help guide you through. Here we have a simple cake. Perhaps you recognize it. Before we can actually venture into the instructions, we have to start here. This step list is where the magic happens. You know, before we get to the other magic. A good way to visualize the step system is to think of it like pages. Page 1 would be the beginning, so step 1 is where to start. Pick the brick you'd like to start with and move it to page 2. Bear with me, this'll make sense in a moment. Sometimes the best method is to start with the lowest brick on the build, but this can get trickier with something like a fighter jet or builds that have greebling on the part of the build that touches the ground. With something more complicated, you'll want to start with a brick near the middle of the build. Back to our cake. Now that we've got our starter brick hidden, we can see what's attached to it. As for having step 2 be page 1, let's name it appropriately. I like to name it something like base 1.1. Now we'll pick some of these outside bricks and move them to a new step. Exciting, I know. Now that you've got these on their own page, rename it to B1.2 and hide it. Studio has a lot of neat hotkeys attached to it. You can use L in this instance to hide the selected bricks. Press V to get back to your regular selection tool, and pick some more bricks to place into a new step. I'd avoid putting too many bricks into one step. I try to keep the max around 8, as any more than that can clutter the page and make it harder to follow. There are some exceptions where it's easy to determine where your 16-round studs go, but I'd leave it to your discretion. Now I'll use this moment to talk about substeps. Sometimes you'll need to attach an engine or something more complex than these initial steps will allow. Select the desired region, and click this little nifty Create into Submodel button here. It will block out the entire section, and Studio will now treat this area as a single brick. To resume making the instructions, we'll hit Edit. It will gray out these surrounding bricks, but don't panic, they're not ghosts now, it's okay. This just makes it so that we can edit the steps for this individual component. You'll see that it says Step 1 again. So now you pick the brick you want to start with, and move it to Step 2. Here's where the naming convention comes into play. Because our last step was B1.32, we can name this one Frame 1.33. This will correspond to its page number later. From there, keep organizing. Once you've organized and hidden the entire build, we can come back up and see that Step 1 is empty. Delete it, and Step 2 will become Step 1. Haha, foreshadowing. Return to the main model and keep building. Once you're done, you can put this nice little cherry on top. Now the real kicker. Go back to Step 1 and see that it's empty. And you, being the clever little cookie you are, have already guessed this bit. Now that it's deleted, you can see that Step 1 is base 1.1. From here, we can go to Instructions. You'll see Step Editor and Page View here at the top. Since we're just interested in the PDF section, we'll skip Step Editor for now. Page 1, helpfully marked, is shown here. You'll see your bricks needed here, and the brick itself. If you click outside the brick, it will highlight the overall section, and this menu over here will pop up. Click Change Step View. It has a few default views, but I prefer to use Custom. I set it to -45 and 45 respectively. This will give you a 45-degree top view. If you set it to 45-45, it will give you a bottom view. Feel free to play around with these numbers and get your desired angle. On Step 2, we can use the left and right rotation buttons in the step view to get a good view on our new bricks. I'll also take this opportunity to demonstrate
Activate Buffer Exchange.
If you click on the brick itself, it'll offer this button. If you select it, you have the XYZ coordinates grid you can modify. Doing so, say for example setting the Y to 55, will move this individual brick and add an arrow to the mix. You can click and move this arrow around as the program often places it in an inconvenient spot. You can also lengthen or shorten the arrow as needed using the round sliders here. Buffer Exchange allows an invaluable edge to be carved in making your instructions easier to read. Why is it called Buffer Exchange? Beats me. This step is automatically included with that submodel we created earlier. You'll notice it removed the cake we built around it, and isolates this portion from the build. Once we reach the part where it combines the completed submodel with the original, we can activate the Buffer Exchange to show exactly how the frame should be combined with the base. Using the previous steps and instructions, we've finished baking our cake with this last little red square piece. If you're colorblind, I'm sorry. I've tried to use the item shape to dictate instructions as opposed to using color. Now, I like to go back to the main model, being sure to save, and I select the last step. I then add a step with no bricks, title it Null, and then go back into the instructions. If you scroll to Null, you'll see that it adds a page with a completed build and no bricks to add. Here you can get a nice looking overall view. Clicking to add a new page, we can add a render. What's a render? It's another neat feature of Studio. Back out and click this camera icon, and you'll get a separate window. Here you can choose an angle, adjust your lens, set the lighting direction, lighting intensity, background color, or whether or not you want the background to be transparent. Once you hit render, it will generate an image based on what settings you selected. And like any good chef, here's one I prepared earlier. Equipping sensible restraint, we can get creative here. I like to add the personalized screenshot showing the build in action, as it were. And like any good chef, here's one I prepared earlier.
This was a triumph. I'm making a note here. Huge success.
Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. There's a lot I wanted to include, like changing the page colors or adding watermarks, but they unfortunately hit the cutting room floor to make this video a little more bearable. Ha. Thank you again. Feel free to check out my socials down in the description below, and I hope you have a spectacular day.
For the good of all of us, except the ones who are dead.
Sometimes the best method is to start with the below. Fuck!